Okay, it is 10 a.m. and we're going to get started. So thank you all for logging into our webinar this morning entitled Substance Use Prevention in the Workplace and Its Role in the Community. This is the third webinar in our workplace webinar series. My name is Karen Bellinger and I'm the Program Director for Drug-Free America Foundation. We have a few housekeeping items. First, everyone will be muted. We encourage you to write your questions in the chat box. We will answer them at the end. And let's see, the webinar will be recorded and you will get a copy of the webinar recording and the PowerPoint slide deck by completing our survey that I will email to you later today. We will be having another webinar coming up in August timeframe. We don't have a date yet, but we will notify everyone that has registered on this webinar of the future date. So let's get started. A brief bio on our presenter. Carlton Hall is the president and CEO of Carlton Hall Consulting, LLC. A multifaceted full-service consulting firm designed to provide customized solutions and enable measurable change for communities, organizations, families, and individuals. Carlton Hall has been providing intensive substance abuse prevention focused and community problem-solving services to the nation for the last 25 years. His responsibilities, unique set of skills and experience have made him one of the most highly sought-after instructors and guides for community problem solving in every state and territory in the nation, as well as internationally with successful achievements in South Africa, Ghana, Bermuda, Kenya, and others. Carlton spent 12 years with the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, CADCA, serving in several leadership positions, including most recently acting vice president, training operations, and acting director for CADCA's National Coalition Institute. In this role, Carlton provided critical leadership supporting the successful design and delivery of the community outreach component of the Drug Enforcement Administration's DEA 360 strategy in priority cities across the country. Carlton is one of the primary architects of CADCA's National Coalition Academy. The Academy, a year-long coalition development program, is designed to increase the effectiveness of communities and drug demand reduction, producing population-level outcomes. Currently, Carlton and the Carlton Hall Consulting Team provide executive training and technical assistance and support to the Southeast PTTC Region 4. So welcome, Carlton.
Thank you very much. All right. Can you hear me, Karen?
Yes.
Terrific. Can I share my screen now?
Yes.
Let's do this. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And I am so looking forward to this opportunity to speak with you all. Thank you. I am looking forward to having this conversation because I think one of the things that it offers, I believe, is an opportunity for those of us in the prevention field to look at an often overlooked tool of prevention, which is the drug-free workplace program, and how it might interact with all the strategies that we're trying to employ as preventionists, looking to mitigate substance misuse in our communities. And so I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. For those that have decided to participate with this, I'm hoping to make this as engaging and interactive as possible. I want to start off by sharing and offering my thanks to the Drug-Free America Foundation, my good friends there, and the extraordinary work that they do internationally, as well as for and on behalf of our nation, as one of the premier leaders in policy and training for substance misuse prevention. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to start off by sharing why this conversation even, I believe, came to me as an important conversation to have. It actually started for me, as a thought that kind of started when I was providing a keynote presentation for another extraordinary organization, the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children. This organization has as its primary mission to mitigate the dangers that are posed to children everywhere when they are exposed to physical or emotional harm as a result of the drugs use within their environment. And when I delivered the keynote for that organization on the exact same day, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, released a report that indicated that the opioid epidemic was fueled by a deluge of opioid pills throughout our nation that was even greater than had originally been presented. More than 76 billion opioid pills saturating almost every county within our communities, within our country. What that looks like graphically is what you see in front of you. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you see this map and you can understand this map as being the environment in which we all live, everywhere you see purple is in danger. Everywhere you see purple is in trouble. In fact, some counties, as noted here, are experiencing more than 150 pills per person per year to that degree. And what that really brought me to thinking about is the fact that there's a lot of purple on this map, indicating there's a lot of danger being posed to those that are within this environment. This became important to me because recently, and my good friends at Drug Free America Foundation know this, I became a grandfather, and as a grandfather, I have remarkable grandchildren. And when I visit my grandchildren in their homes, I noticed something that was extraordinary. When I would go to visit them in their homes, I found that I had great difficulty managing how to even navigate the stairs in my children's home because they have these grates up, and I have multiple degrees, but for the life of me, I can't figure out how to open that up. And even once I get downstairs, if I'm interested in a snack, I found that it was difficult for me to open up the cabinets because they have these things in place, and I couldn't charge my phone because when I went to charge my phone, they were blocked. And not to be crude, but I think there are some areas in our homes that should not be restricted. Now, I'm taking a bit of a humorous look at this, but here's the question that I would pose to you all. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd ask you to put this in the chat box. In this environment, who's the priority? And Karen or Chantel, if you wouldn't mind sharing with me if they are sharing things in the chat box.
The kids.
The kids are the exactly. And I ask another question: are the strategies that are being employed here proactive or reactive? Please put that in the chat box.
Overwhelmingly proactive.
Overwhelmingly proactive. The point that we're making is that prevention is all about ensuring that we are prioritizing the environment so that it is safe for our most vulnerable populations. And there is nothing subtle about that. There should be nothing subtle about that. In fact, here in this demonstration, it is crystal clear who the priority is and what the priority is. And in a very real sense, that's exactly the point of a drug-free workplace program or policy. It is about ensuring that the environment is prioritized to make sure that it's safe for both the employees and the customers who are within the context of that environment. So as we go through this training, what we're going to have a bit of a conversation about is exactly what does that look like when enacted? How do we establish a drug-free workplace? And how does that relate to our own community prevention efforts? How is it that we can take best advantage of making sure that tool serves our purposes of prioritizing prevention on behalf of our communities? So what I want to do is I'd love to start off by having a bit of a conversation about placing some context for this, which is all about starting off with understanding kind of the essence of the problem and the nature of the problem. You know what? The expense of one work-related workplace accident, the expense of one operational error, the expense of one customer service mishap can absolutely devastate a company. Some estimates show that these incident rates are at least 3 times as much when a substance misusing employee is involved. As you can see here, there are some interesting findings that we would want to take note of. When a substance misuser is in the workplace, they are 10 times more likely to have an accident or miss work. They have more mistakes, have a lower quality of work. There are increased complaints and conflicts, 4 times more likely to cause a work-related accident. That is happening within the backdrop of the fact that here in the United States, we consume more than 60% of the world's production of illegal drugs. Nearly 70% of all current users of illegal drugs are employed. We're talking about the context of that environment. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans who are employed between the ages of 18 and 35 have illegally used drugs. 1/3 of our employees know of illegal sales that are taking place within the context of our environment. And 20% of young workers admit to using marijuana on the job. That's kind of the national context that we are looking at. And I would ask you, given that context, what kind of impacts, what kind of consequential impacts do you expect we're seeing in the context of our workplace? If you wouldn't mind, I'd ask you to share some of the general consequential impacts as a result of our exposure to so much drug misuse.
We have job loss, decreased productivity.
Yes.
Employee conflict, poor work environment, poor attitudes, normalization of use.
Good.
Possibly workplace accidents, absenteeism, accidents, low quality in products, decreased employee morale.
Absolutely. And if you look at this listing, this list is not exhaustive. I would share that you could probably add many more to this list. But as you're looking at this, these are happening and taking place within the context of our community environment. And one of the things that I want everyone on this webinar to fully understand is that when we share and when we're talking about the workforce, that's not an abstract term. When we're talking about the workforce, we're talking about our neighbors. We're talking about our family members. We're talking about our friends. We're talking about those that we interact with, that we engage with every single day. So this is not an abstract concept with respect to who and whom we interact with and engage with. And so as you're thinking about the prevalence of drug use that's taking place, particularly here in this country, in the US, and I know that there may be others from other countries that are joining us for this webinar. As you think about that context, understand our relationship to those issues and to those challenges. This is not something that is happening exclusively and only impacts the workplace environment. Here, there is a survey that one state took. This is just the state of Indiana, who decided to ask their business leaders to share what they've observed in their workplace. Again, I'm merely providing some context for the importance of a drug-free workplace strategy to be employed. The big picture that I want you to get from this is that while they asked the entire population of business leaders within their state, there was only 20% who indicated that they either did not observe something or that they did not respond or to the request, that there was nothing to share. Only 20%. 80% said they absolutely did identify a number of issues related to substance misuse that was happening within the context of their workplace environment. There are issues and challenges that are taking place. Why? Because of marijuana use that is taking place inside the workplace. You see here that the National Institute on Drug Abuse indicates that those who have tested positive for marijuana had 55% more industrial accidents, 85% more injuries, 75% greater absenteeism than those who tested negative. This is not an abstract idea or abstract concept that we're speaking to. And as we're thinking about marijuana in the workplace, it's important to understand that we are in the midst of a national dialogue around that affects the workplace environment and any considerations for a drug-free workplace policy to put forth. For example, what is it that we need to consider if we are changing our ideas around medical use with respect to marijuana? Is that legal within the context of the workplace? How do we look at things like intoxication? How can we check for signs of impairment? There are a number of challenges that we have as a society as we are trying to think about what does a good drug-free workplace policy need to consist of as it relates to changing the changing context with respect to marijuana. We have to be attentive to that. Marijuana is one aspect. Non-medical use of prescription drugs in our nation, which has fueled the opioid epidemic, not only in our country, but globally, also stands as a huge challenge for us. With 23% of the United States workforce using prescription drugs or reportedly using prescription drugs non-medically, we're seeing a huge cost to our employers. That huge cost amounts to more than $53 billion, $42 billion of which is attributed to lost productivity, as you see here. And just so that you understand that that's not in the abstract, if we go back to that original survey that I shared with you for the state of Indiana, here you see the number of those that have indicated that the non-medical use of prescription drugs being an issue for them, with a tragic 5% of those who have identified overdoses that have taken place within the context of their workplace. The point that we're making here is that the huge consumption of illegal drugs or drugs used illegally here in our nation and in nations that are represented here on this call are having a huge impact on our workplace environment and context. Our friends, our neighbors, our family members who are within that context. And it is an area in which we can have some incredible impact upon should we look at that. And so I want to stop here and I want to ask this question. I want to ask you, what specific drugs are being misused in the workplace in your communities? And just take a moment to identify one or two, if you wouldn't mind, so we can hear from you all and see what it is that you all are seeing in your workplace and context.
Marijuana, heroin, painkillers, opioids, cocaine, fentanyl, heroin.
Incredible.
Prescription opioids, cocaine, painkillers, alcohol, marijuana, and vaping.
Incredible.
Medical
Incredible.
marijuana, painkillers, vaping.
Thank you, Chantal. Incredible. And again, I would go back to that original image that I showed, the graphic of the US. And if we can understand that as our environment, I would suggest that we are not communicating clearly what our priorities are within the context of our environment, particularly when we're continuing to see the misuse of those drugs that are taking place, even within the context of a workplace environment. So how do we address that? What is it that we need to consider? A drug-free workplace program is a strategy that allows us to address this issue. What is a drug-free workplace program? What does it consist of? How do we define it? It is an employment setting where all employees adhere to a program of policies and activities designed to provide a safe workplace to discourage alcohol and drug misuse and encourage treatment and recovery and support the return to work of all those employees that have substance use problems. I love this definition because it shows and demonstrates to us that a drug-free workplace program consists of many complex ideas. It talks about what we need to do within the employment setting. It talks about a set of programs and activities that are designed. It talks about the mission of discouraging alcohol misuse and drug misuse. It talks about the encouragement of treatment and recovery and providing an operative manner in which folks might be able to return who have even expressed that they've had some issues or challenges with substance misuse in their own lives. Those are separate elements that are all contended with in the implementation of a drug-free workplace program. There are multiple goals of a drug-free workplace program. The goal of the drug-free workplace program is to ensure that workers or employees are fit for duty, that they are protected, to ensure that the environment is safe so that employees can work proficiently, to reduce absenteeism and make sure that we're able to promote productivity and profitability, and to cooperate with rehabilitation for those employees that are seeking help. In the context of those goals, there are two perspectives that need to be thought about. One perspective is the perspective of the employer, right? And so the employer seeks to create that safe work environment, but they're focused on making sure that employers are not using alcohol or drugs during their work time, right? Making sure that there's no selling or distribution of drugs during the work time, and they're looking at how all of this is affecting the work of those who are indulging in these activities outside of the workplace, right? And so how is that impacting upon the work that is taking place within the context of their work environment? So those are the things that an employer is trying to address in implementing a drug-free workplace program. But at the same time, there are employee considerations as well. Employees are looking to come to work and not be impacted by drug misuse that's maybe taking place around them. They're also looking for an opportunity that if indeed they have some issues with substance misuse disorder, that there is an avenue, there is a way, there is support for seeking treatment and recovery. And they're looking at how they might not be affected by the drug use that is taking place with others, and how to go about suggesting and reporting that with confidentiality in mind, and being safe and feeling safe to be able to report that kind of use. A drug-free workplace program is legislation that balances those two perspectives: the perspective of the employer, but the perspective of the rights of the employee. And as we dig deeper and we look at what a drug-free workplace, what the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988 offers, this act really serves as the model for all the drug-free workplace programs and activities that are being employed not merely here in the United States, but in countries around the world, are utilizing these 5 components, right? A Drug-Free Workplace Act is an applied concept that is built on these 5 components. Those 5 components are a drug-free workplace policy that needs to be in place, supervisor training that needs to be offered, the employee education, all employees need to be educated as well, drug and alcohol testing, and an employee assistance program. These components are designed to create a safe workplace environment for all employees and all customers, to suppress alcohol and drug use while at the same time supporting treatment and recovery of substance misusing employees, thereby greatly minimizing the harmful effects that substance misuse is having on that workplace environment. While these are the 5 core components of a drug-free workplace program, and we're going to get into each one of these so that you can have a sense of what's involved, a number of other components have recently emerged to really and greatly enhance the drug-free workplace programs in its implementation here nationally and around the world. And we're going to speak to some of these as well. So if we take this and look at this, how do we get started with this? Well, it is imperative that we start by creating a written policy that clearly defines what drug or substance misuse actually means, and how to offer meaningful and accessible prevention tips, and to disclose how violations of the policy will actually be handled, right? The critical part of all of this is that once this is written, it must be enforced consistently and without bias. And so it is imperative that we start with a written policy. Once that policy is written, then you have to make sure that your supervisors and your managers are trained on what this policy is and includes. The training is typically about 2 hours, and what we strongly recommend is that there is a substance misuse professional that provides that training. The training consists of a number of things. The training consists of looking at current trends, looking at signs of impairment. The training consists of looking at reasonable suspicion and how do you document and test for all of this. It really is about building the skills necessary to identify a problematic employee within the context of that workplace. And so one of the things that we recommend that I see that many companies employ is the acronym SIGN, which they offer to supervisors and managers. And SIGN stands for see impairment, gather facts, never accuse. See impairment, gather facts, and never accuse. It is imperative that when approaching a suspected impaired employee, that supervisors must remain professional and ethical, recognize that their role is the role of a fact gatherer and not a therapist or someone that's adjudicating the situation, but must look at everything objectively and without bias and never ever accuse. There is a big difference. You might be able to hear if someone said, "Hey, John, it's clear that you're drunk and you ought to maybe just go home," versus, "John, it seems that your eyes are bloodshot. I've been observing you for about 20 minutes and your speech is a bit slurred and you're not walking straight. In fact, you may be 15 minutes late coming in today, and I have a reasonable suspicion of impairment. I'd like you to come with me." There's a difference between how those two approaches happen, regardless of how well the supervisor may think they know John, regardless of what they may assume is what the situation actually is. So once supervisors are trained, it is imperative that all employees receive an education on many of the same things, current drug trends, prevention tips, and the like. But a lot of this really is about ensuring that the employees understand their rights, understand their rights to confidentiality and privacy, understand that there is a safe context and environment for which they may be able to come forward and share their own issues or challenges that they're having with substance misuse and their desire to seek help with respect to that, or their ability to report the observation of misuse that may be taking place within the workplace context. That brings us to drug testing, drug and alcohol testing. It's a critical component of any drug-free workplace program that needs to happen. It has to be ensured to be fair, legal, ethical, and applied consistently throughout. It needs to denote what drugs are being tested for, so folks can understand that, what methods of collection are being utilized, whether it's blood or urine or hair, for example. It can happen in any number of ways, whether that's pre-hire or post-incident, when a reasonable suspicion is suggested. It can happen randomly or upon return to work. It is suggested that any combination of these will be highly effective for the workplace. And then lastly, that brings us to the last component, which is an employee assistance program. And the employee assistance program is a great resource within a company to provide. One of the best aspects of this program for the employee is the fact that it provides a referral process. And that referral process, in many cases, the EAP program is the place that handles substance misusing employees from start to finish and really allows for them to pay attention to the employees' rights as they go through this process, keeping HR updated only as needed, and provides an opportunity for that employee to return with a clean bill of health with their confidentiality all being addressed. And so an employee assistance program is a very crucial component of a drug-free workplace program. The other components that we suggested and showed that have some real effect and impact, one is policies that you can put in place that would help support the rehabilitation and recovery of employers and employees, and making sure that you're able to address that. Things like leave policies and return to work policies help with respect to that. A employee wellness program that can be adopted within a workplace, really helping to promote health and wellness and abstinence from drug misuse to take place. And there are a number of ways that employers can put that in the context of their work environment, and other types of family-friendly policies such as paid and unpaid leaves, flexible work hours that all contribute to allowing folks to maintain a healthy environment to work in, free from drug misuse, or to mitigate the harms associated with those that are engaged with that. The point being is that a drug-free workplace program, as it's being implemented, needs to be tailored to whatever the kind of business, the size of the business, the context in which that business is happening. It is different and applied differently. Depending upon those settings, you are able to determine the best setting that works for you and your context and in your community. And so how do we get started with this? Our recommendation is that you start off with understanding that dealing with the issues of drugs in the workplace context and workplace environment is a very touchy and sensitive issue in many cases. And so you shouldn't rush into that. You should start by establishing what we refer to as a workplace health and safety committee, bringing together a group of those that are going to be impacted by the program to be a participant in the design of that program. Clarifying what the components of the program ought to be, looking at establishing a timeline, and determining what decision-making processes ought to be in the context of when things and challenges and problems demonstrate themselves, identifying what the process and what the outcome measures ought to be. So here are the 5 steps to getting started with a drug-free workplace program implementation that community prevention leaders can help to promote in the context of your community. The benefits that you would want to share, that you want to offer, is to the employers: reduced health benefit expenses, reduced premiums, decreased absenteeism, increased work productivity. Those are all kind of the tangible things, but there are some intangible benefits as well that they can look at by the promotion of a drug-free workplace program. Improved morale, decreased disciplinary actions, and the commitment being shared among all of your employees that they are committed to the health and safety and well-being of their fellow employees within the context of that environment. So I shared about the problem. I shared about the components, what we defined a drug-free workplace program, and we defined the components of that drug-free workplace program. This is a poll that I'd like to offer. Does your community recognize the problems and consequences of drugs in the workplace? Yes or no? And Chantel, when you see that we have the respondents?
Yeah, so it looks like about 63%, 60-ish percent say yes, and 40% say no.
Got it, got it, got it, got it, got it. So there's some work that we all ought to be able to do. And this is actually where we're coming to now, right? Is the fact that what is our role in helping to promote this very important program and practice and strategy that can really enhance our prevention efforts within our community. The big idea that I want to provide for you all here is the fact that a drug-free workplace program is really can be a force multiplier for our community prevention efforts, in that it aligns very nicely with the goals and the intent and the strategies that we have employed as preventionists within our communities, such as addressing all the aspects of the continuum of care, reaching specific hard to reach populations, and promoting healthy norms within the context of our society in ways that are probably more effective than some of the campaigns that we have. The continuum of care, many of you recognize this from the Institute of Medicine and their promotion of the fact that if we are going to impact drug misuse within our society, we need all of these elements at play, everything from promotion to looking at the various elements of prevention through treatment and recovery. The point that I want to make here is that a drug-free workplace program actually supports and enhances all of these aspects, right? From promotion through every type of prevention strategy and modality that we would implement, supporting treatment and recovery, as we said multiple times. And so a drug-free workplace program fits and aligns itself very, very nicely with the work that many of us are currently doing within our society. We just have to draw those connections and make those linkages within our own prevention work and prevention efforts. Secondly, there are those segments of our society that we know have traditionally been hard to reach, such as the 18 to 24-year-olds within our populations, right? A drug-free workplace program, why? Because that's where they are. They're working. In the context of that work environment, they are receiving information about drug use and its consequences. There's a clear standard that's being established, and there's an opportunity for them to have access to resources and interventions in a way that is accessible to them. For those of you interested in the risk factors that this might address, community norms, laws and enforcement, favorable attitudes, availability, and the protective factors are very, very clearly stated with respect to a drug-free workplace program. But not only that set of individuals, but parents are also those that are supported through a drug-free workplace program. Why? By providing up-to-date information about current uses and trends, looking at ways in which they might be seeking help and support, and looking at the family-friendly workplace policies that will allow for the dealing of the issues and challenges that may be occurring in our family. All this can happen within the context of a drug-free workplace program or policy. Here are the risk factors that could be associated with, and here are the protective factors that you would want to consider as you're doing this. And lastly, how many of us have consistently said that it's very difficult for us to engage the business sector within our coalitions or our community prevention work efforts? Well, a drug-free workplace program and helping to promote drug-free workplace programs within your community is a perfect way to align your interests and your goals with those of the business sectors within your community. Again, allowing for the opportunity for you to align your strength, your resources to a need that they may have. training of employees, looking at supporting and providing support and resources for their family-friendly workplace programs and strategies are just a couple of ways in which all of this can happen. A number of employers are using strategies such as creating a drug awareness day for all of their employees, as an example. You can partner in that regard. And so there are a number of ways that the community can link up in the support of a drug-free workplace program in a way that provides a force multiplier for your prevention efforts. And here again are the risk factors associated with that. And so what I want to do is ask you one last question. What are the current efforts in your community? You don't have to put this in the chat because we're getting ready to go to a Q&A period. But I just want you to consider what are some of the current efforts in your community that are being utilized to address the drugs in the workplace. Are you aware of them? As you're thinking about that, I'd simply want to just offer that the main point of this is the fact that our workplaces are impacted. Our workplace provide the context to reach our society. It is a way to give and offer tools that would help promote prevention goals that you all have and improve and increase the productivity, the health and the well-being of those that are within the context of that workplace. A drug-free workplace program and strategy is directly aligned with the prevention efforts that many of you are employing. And this was a conversation to hopefully bring that to the fore of your attention. I really would want you to consider what you will do with this information to be able to help promote drug-free workplace programs and practices in your community. Do you see your role with promoting that now in a way that you might not have before this webinar? That is my hope. That is my desire. The reason why all of this is vitally important, vitally necessary in my regard is because we are living in some incredibly important times. And as Dr. King has indicated, and I think is extraordinarily appropriate for today, we are confronted with a fierce urgency of now, with the dueling challenges of an opioid epidemic, along with an extraordinary marijuana legalization movement that is sweeping across many of our communities, looking at the pandemic and the issues and the crises that are associated with the pandemic that's hindering and complicating and impacting all of our work. There is a fierce, urgent now that is associated with our work. And so I mentioned my grandchildren. I want to share with you that they are the reason why I do this. And so Ethan and Callie and the twins, Carmen and Valentina, on their behalf, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention to this. And Karen, I'm going to turn this over to you for Q&A that we might have for the remainder of our time. Thank you all very much.
Well, thanks so much, Carlton. You have such a wealth of knowledge, and I'm certain that that was very much appreciated by our participants. So we'll now start with the questions. If you have one to ask, you can please use the Q&A function or the chat box. Unfortunately, my computer screen has gone blank, so I cannot read it. So Chantel will read. This was a little bit of a surprise, but Chantel will read, and then between Carlton and myself, we can get these answered. So.
Yeah, so the first question we have is, what would you say to the businesses who are resistant to have a policy because of how it discourages staffing? My home community has many who won't apply for a job if they know the company does drug tests, and those companies go short-staffed for years at a time. and are unsure how to strike a balance or avoid low staffing numbers for doing the right thing. So what would you say to the businesses who are resistant to have?
No, it's a really important question. And what I would offer is that there's been some empirical evidence that has shown that, particularly in the US, that there are those who are managing and working, managing may not be the best way of saying it, but who are living with the challenges and the issues of substance misuse and substance use disorder. And there is empirical evidence that suggests that in many cases, those who are contending with those issues and those challenges actually seek out employers who do not have a drug-free workplace program in place, who do not test. It is actually counter what it is that the questioner is kind of bringing up. And so when I would have a conversation with that employer, I would share that is part of what's taking place, and that putting in place something like drug testing really is about achieving two goals. One is that you're wanting to weed out, if you will, those that might bring that substance misuse problem and issue into your workplace environment. Secondly, it is a way of sending a very, very clear message as to what's accepted and what's not accepted within the context of your workplace. And so I would suggest that there are more benefits to a drug-free workplace program and drug testing in the workplace environment and context than there are detriments.
I would also add that that the focus may need to be on the industry, not the particular employers, and getting the industry kind of on board to do this. We've dealt with some associations of electrical workers and plumbers here in the past, and that's an ongoing issue, especially for some of the skilled trades, that it is difficult to find persons who can pass a drug test, but yet the industries some of the industries are required to do drug testing especially for certain contracting jobs. Probably the best contracting jobs, the ones that are the most lucrative, require that. And so I just think that might be another option to look at and to get in with the industry associations and to make changes in your community.
Absolutely. Amy, do you have anything to add to that? I think she's on mute.
Chantel, how about the next question?
To add.
The second question is, does every employer have a drug-free assistance program?
Say that again, Chantel, I missed it.
Does every employer have a drug-free assistance program?
No.
Is that employee assistance program, I guess? That sounds like that.
Yeah, if they're referring to the employee assistance program, I think I heard two things, and I'll try to answer both. One, no, every employer does not have a drug-free workplace program in place. That's number one. Number two is a drug-free workplace program is made up of a number of components. An employee assistance program is one strongly recommended component of a drug-free workplace program. And no, not all employers who have a drug-free workplace program in place also have an employee assistance program. In some cases, there are costs associated with that that the employers have to kind of figure out and contend with how they address some of those costs. But there are a number of strategies to employ to make it affordable for many employers. So that's my answer. Karen, do you have anything else to add?
Just that is not generally in the states that have the workers' compensation premium credits, which I don't know if you mentioned anything. I'm guessing not. There are some states that have a special discount for having a comprehensive drug-free workplace. And there's probably about a dozen states in our country that have that, but not all of them, none of them require that program, but it is considered one of the, having a source of where employees can get assistance is important. But there are other features that can be utilized, just having employers that know where somebody can get help, or whether it's a list of treatment locations in the area that you're in, or other services in your community. That's an important thing. So I work with employers to try to develop that and kind of come up with some ideas on that.
That's fantastic.
So that's it.
And then we have one more question. The last question states, is there a certification required for someone to be able to deliver drug-free workplace training?
Nope.
Karen, I'm going to defer to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, there is not.
Yeah.
And we have lots of people, whether it's in coalitions. The main part of the training is probably just the basic employee education, and that really comes from the employer, explaining to the employees what the parameters are of their workplace policy, what are the kind of general procedures, what are the features, like for example, if they had an employee assistance program, how that's a benefit to them and what they can do, and just some of the, what their options are. Every business is different as far as what they have and what their options are. If they're in a industry that has a union involvement, sometimes there are benefits through the unions and things like that. So, did I get that? Did I get that pretty good?
Yeah, from my vantage point, yes. I would simply say this to those that are still on the call: the Drug-Free America Foundation, they're the gurus on this, right? And with respect to their ability to provide resources, extraordinary resources, with any host of your prevention, treatment, and recovery needs. And so, even after this, please reach out to Amy, reach out to Karen, reach out to Chantel to address some of those questions. This extraordinary resource.
Right.
Amy wanted to give feedback on the training, and let me see where that is.
So that's so I was just about to say that. So we offer comprehensive drug-free workplace programs to businesses. There is a small cost that's involved in that, and it includes drug-free workplace policies, programs, our online training. It includes referrals to a very reasonably priced drug testing, which would be using LabCorp or Quest locations primarily. It has a lot of features, but on our website, which is this is for the National Drug-Free Workplace Alliance, that is ndwa.org, and you can click on it, and there is a feature on for our membership programs, and a feature for our online training. So a company can sign up to get their employees trained, and it's at a very good price point. So, but that basically gives over everything that they do. But the main thing back on the training is the basic education is coming from the employer. So as far as the program, and then what we provide is more detailed information on the drug-free workplace. What's involved in a drug-free workplace, why, you know, just the effects of drugs and how they affect the workplace and the employees and so on. So that's, I think, kind of covers that. So I see that we are at 11 o'clock right now. So I want to thank everybody once again for joining this very enlightening webinar. And we will be having another webinar. We have 3 more in our series that'll go through the end of the year. And so you all will receive an invitation to those as soon as we have those prepared and up. So this afternoon you will receive an email that will have a survey, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that survey and return it, and you will then get access to the recording and the slide deck. So thank you so much, and this will conclude our webinar. Thank you so much for attending.